But if you use unsanded grout instead, you significantly reduce the chance of it getting scratched up. So another reason you would not want to use sanded grout, besides having... Now, let's have a real-life honest moment with Julie here. Sort of shoring up the questions regarding grout really can open up a whole new world in your journey of Mosaic, because once you get the grouting down, you're going to be a mosaic making machine, and you're going to be putting out work like crazy. So in this video, we'll discuss sanded and unsanded grout, plus when to use it and not, and is buying only THINSET a good idea? Let's get to it. Welcome back. And if you're new here, my name is Julie. And on this channel, we talk about tips, tricks, tools, adhesives, materials, and specific mosaic projects, all to shorten your learning curve when it comes to creating mosaic art. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please consider subscribing. I recently received a comment on a video that was so dang good, I felt I needed to share it with all of you. Now it has to do with grout and the different types of grout that are available, plus THINSET mortar. And maybe you too have been wondering, how do I know what to buy? So the viewer's question begins. Hi Julie, I've been devouring your videos for the past couple of weeks as I plan to get started in mosaics. I feel like I've already learned so much from you. I was wondering, how to determine whether to use sanded grout or grout without sand. Also, as a beginner, would it be a good option to only purchase THINSET and use that to grout as well? I know you've mentioned being able to do that, but I didn't know if grout served a specific purpose that THINSET could not accomplish. Thank you. I thought this two-part question was so dang good because it's straightforward. And oftentimes when you're first starting out in mosaics, one of the things that's the most confusing is trying to figure out the grout situation. What to buy, how to mix it up, how to use it, can it be colored, blah, 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 blah. I've got a whole playlist devoted to this topic, and I will include a link to it down below in the description so you can check it out. So figuring out the purpose of grout and how to use it to your benefit can open many doors in your mosaic journey. So in this video, we'll discuss sanded and unsanded grout, plus when to use it and not, and is buying only THINSET a good idea? We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. We'll begin by discussing the first question of this comment, which is sanded versus unsanded grout. It sounds like they're against each other, right? But when you think about it, they both do the same thing. They fill in the gap or grout line between your mosaic tesserae. And if you look at the manufacturer's instructions on a bag or box of grout, you'll see guidelines as to the who, what, when, where, and how of using their product. And as you get deeper into your mosaic journey and you test the limits of your tesserae and adhesives and the grout, you'll start to come up with your own methods and recipe, which may not be what's recommended by the manufacturers. But in order to get to that point, you need to put in the time of working with the tesserae, grout, or THINSET, or what have you. I'll be honest. I never measure the dry powder to liquid ratio anymore when I'm mixing up grout and THINSET. I've been doing it for over 25 years. I know what I need to look for, and I know what I need it to feel like on the spoon or the spatula. I know when it's ready. But as a beginner or someone who's still unsure, always refer to the manufacturer's instructions when mixing up grout and THINSET. There's no shame in that, but back to the grout question. Sanded grout should be used if your grout line is 1/8 of an inch to 5/8 of an inch or wider. Unsanded grout should be used if your grout line is 1/16 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch wide. Now, let's have a real life honest moment with Julie here. Have I used grout sanded grout on a grout line that was less than 1/8 of an inch? I did. I did. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I did. I spent a long time grouting that piece. But I did. I don't advocate for you to do that. I think it's sort of a bad idea because the sanded grout is full of sand. I mean, that is part of what is in there. It's a combination of things. But the sand and everything else needs to be able to get in between your tesserae. And if your tesserae are so close, it's hard to get that in there. That's why it's much better to use unsanded grout when your tesserae are so close to each other, when that grout line is so small or narrow. So another reason why in that kind of situation you wouldn't want to use sanded grout as opposed to unsanded grout. If you're unable to get your sanded grout into the grout line because simply you just can't get it in there because your tesserae are so close, therefore, but you want a grout line. Keep that in mind. You absolutely want a grout line between your tesserae. You end up creating a fake grout line in the area where your tesserae meet. Then you sacrifice some of the surface area of your tesserae to give the illusion that there is a grout line, a deep grout line. And it's simply not the case. So you're losing the surface area of your tesserae to create this false grout line, basically. Whereas if you had just used unsanded grout, you wouldn't have to worry about all of that. So another reason you would not want to use sanded grout, besides having a super narrow grout line, is because some of the materials that you may use in your mosaic could get scratched up from sanded grout. So in particular, I'm talking about items like plastic or metal, which you might find in mixed media mosaic pieces, or even materials such as marble. Some mirror tesserae are plastic or acrylic, so they're going to get scratched up like nobody's business if you use sanded grout. But if you use unsanded grout instead, you significantly reduce the chance of it getting scratched up. The second question of this YouTube comment asked if it would be a good option to only purchase THINSET to act as an adhesive and your grout. And yes, this individual is correct. I have talked about this in a number of videos here on my channel that you can in fact use THINSET mortar as your adhesive as well as your grout. But just like with everything in life, there are pros and cons to this. I think that would make a great video. THINSET is incredibly versatile, and there are a number of ways that you can use THINSET with your mosaic art that go far beyond using it as an adhesive or as a grout. But if you're on a budget and the stars align for you, meaning your tesserae are at least 1/8 of an inch away from each other. That's your grout line, at least wider than 1/8 of an inch. And your substrate can be used with THINSET. Then absolutely buy THINSET to use as your grout and your adhesive. And if you're curious about what grouts and THINSETs I use and recommend, I will include them down below in the description. Now, some of this stuff isn't the cheapest, but keep in mind, if you get THINSET and the thinking is, I'm going to use this as my adhesive and my grout, you're basically taking care of two things in one. Not necessarily a BOGO, but you get what I'm saying. So you might have to spend a little more on this, but it may be less than you buying a separate adhesive and a separate grout. And like I mentioned earlier, there are other uses for THINSET other than just using it as an adhesive and a grout, and I will include a playlist to those down below in the description. And keep in mind, a little goes a long way, especially when we're working on smaller projects as opposed to like an architectural project. But when we're in our creative spaces or our studios, a little thinset, a little grout goes a long way. So when you see that it's sold in a 10-pound bag or 25-pound bag, understand that you're going to have that for a little while. So the cost per use is really, really low. Told you that was a good question. Really good question. Short, sweet, and to the point. Like, grout is confusing, right? I can remember when I was first starting in Mosaic, I dreaded grouting. Like, I would tile so many things before I would like grout, and then I would have like a grouting day, and I dreaded that grouting day. You know, it was sort of a crapshoot if my grout was gonna crack, because back then I didn't realize I needed to prep my substrates. A lot of the substrates that I used at the time needed to be prepped. Is my grout gonna crack or not? And the dread of that, and was I gonna knock off, you know, a tessera as I was grouting? So then there was always that. There was no YouTube channel to follow to learn all of this stuff. Like, this is why I want to shorten your learning curve, because it was, I don't know, I love the tiling process, and then I got to the grout, and now I have no problem. Like, oh, okay, I'm gonna grout. Like, no issue whatsoever, no anxiety or apprehension. But gosh, I remember back when I was first starting in Mosaics, grouting day. Ugh, I dreaded it. Oh my gosh, did I dread it. Although, whatever. I didn't know what I didn't know. But now I know. I hope you got a little nugget of wisdom from this, because sort of shoring up the questions regarding grout really can open up a whole new world in your journey of Mosaic. Because once you get the grouting down, you're going to be a mosaic making machine, and you're going to be putting out work like crazy, because the only limit is your time, you know? So anyways, have fun with it. Thanks for spending a little time with me today, and I'll see you in the next video. For more mosaic inspiration, check out one of these two videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!